fellow readers and booktubers. This is the If I Owned a Bookstore original tag. And I created this tag because I thought it might be fun to indulge in a little make-believe, a little pretend, and try to imagine what it would be like to have your own bookstore. I think this is maybe something a lot of us do from time to time. And so I've come up with some prompts to kind of dig into this make-believe situation a little bit. I want to start off, though, by saying that in trying to imagine what it would be like to have your own bookstore, I'm not talking about a business model here. I'm not a numbers guy. I don't have an MBA. So, owning a bookstore in the real world would involve a lot of serious financial considerations. But that's not what this is about. In trying to imagine what this would be like, first of all, pretend that money's not an issue. Pretend that you're independently wealthy. However, remembering at the same time that moderation in all things. So aesthetic considerations are your only criteria in answering these prompts, okay? And I'll post the prompts down below, but let's walk through them one at a time. First of all, what are the hours of operation of your bookstore? Now, I know here in the Midwest, it seems like most businesses open about 10 o'clock in the morning. And if you live in, the suburbs of Chicago, you shut down about 7 in the evening. Some places will stay open later, depending upon the kind of business that it is. But if you had a bookstore, would you kind of maintain that same kind of traditional hours? Or would you open earlier and close later? Or I thought maybe, if I had a bookstore, maybe on certain weekends, maybe the first weekend of the month, we'd be open 24 hours. Can you imagine the kind of people that come into a bookstore at 3 o'clock in the morning? I think you get some interesting customers. But if this is your bookstore, and what kind of hours would you maintain? The second prompt, is there ambient music? And if so, what kind of music would that be? I often notice in bookstores, and in a lot of businesses too, there's always that music playing in the background. You can, just barely key into it. I think in a bookstore, because bookstores are generally, the atmosphere is much more quiet, the music would be more, I don't want to say intrusive, but you would hear it clearly. So, what kind of music would that be? I know in my pretend bookstore, during the day, it would be classical music with an emphasis on Bach. But when the sun went down, I'd switch over to jazz and the cool jazz from the 50s and the 60s, Miles Davis and Bird and John Coltrane and those guys. And that's just me. In your pretend bookstore, would you even have music? Maybe you wouldn't. The third prompt, is there a coffee bar? I know there's a lot of bookstores today, especially the big bookstores like Barnes & Noble and all that. They have a Starbucks coffee, bar in there. Or would you serve alcohol? I've heard of bookstores that do have a bar, an alcohol bar. I think that's very interesting. I think it would be kind of a tricky thing to maintain. You don't want people getting out of control, but I think most readers don't drink to excess, or if they do, they're not the type of drunks to get into fights. But who knows? But I did hear of one bar that did serve alcohol, but specifically, scotch and brandy and things like that. So, in your bookstore, would you serve alcohol, or would you have a coffee bar? The fourth prompt: are patrons encouraged to linger? And so in this, if that were true, would you have comfortable chairs, those big, nice, comfortable leather chairs? What kind of lighting would you have? Would it be kind of a muted lighting? Or maybe if you sat in a chair, there'd be a little table next to you and a very bright light shining down on you to illuminate the pages that you're reading. Would there be areas for group gatherings? People might have their own book clubs and maybe they could meet in your bookstore. So that's the fourth prompt. The fifth prompt, is there live entertainment? Now in this, I would, in my pretend bookstore, I would shy away from musical entertainment. I'm thinking more of like poetry readings, or if you could kind of corral an author who's just published a book to come in and read excerpts from his book. Maybe you could have a lecture on literature or something like that, and maybe this would be something, a special offering on Friday nights or something like that. That'd be kind of fun. The sixth prompt, where is your bookstore located? Is it in the busy heart of a large city, in a neighborhood of a large city? I know in Chicago, there's these wonderful neighborhoods like Lincoln Park and Wicker Park and Roscoe Village, these wonderful neighborhoods with a lot of tradition in them, a lot of young people, but also older people and families and all of this. And quite a lot of them have little bookstores in there. And I think that would be kind of a nice environment. Or maybe you'd want to have a bookstore in a small town or even in a rural area. You imagine driving down a country road and all of a sudden you notice off to the side of the road is a little bookstore with a nice big parking lot in front of it. I think that would be kind of an interesting atmosphere. The seventh prompt, how does your bookstore look from the outside? Would you go for some sleek, modern look or a dark, brooding kind of thing? I'd go for the Gothic facade to my bookstore. The eighth prompt, what's your specialty? Do you just sell used books or new and used books, fiction or nonfiction or both? Do you have does your bookstore specialize in a particular genre? There are a lot of bookstores like this that only sell mystery stories, or some bookstores specialize only in science fiction. Would you go for something like that? The ninth prompt, what's the name of your bookstore? Now, I came up with these prompts myself, and I came up with a question that I can't answer. I cannot come up with a good name for a bookstore. There is a real bookstore that I think has the greatest name. It's that famous bookstore in Paris called Shakespeare and Company. That's a beautiful name for a bookstore. But as far as my pretend bookstore, I just cannot come up with anything at the moment anyway. And then, of course, the 10th prompt, the ever popular tag some friends. So there it is. I'm posting this, and I've tagged a whole bunch of people. If I don't tag you, you can assume that you have been tagged. And I look forward to everyone's responses to this, because I think it's kind of a fun exercise. So enjoy yourselves. Have a good rest of your day, and stay strong.